All right, welcome to the lesson 3.5, graph using slope-intercept form. Okay, I know this is going to seem confusing taking notes at home, but please just bear with me. It is not that confusing. Pay attention to the notes that you're taking, and you should be fine. Okay. All right, we're only going to do the front side of the notes that you have in front of you, and the first thing we're going to do is the key concept. Okay. Slope-intercept form is what it's called. It's a linear equation. So in other words, it's the equation of a line written in the form y equals mx plus b. So the coefficient in front of x is m, where m, or the coefficient of x, is the slope of the line, and b is the y-intercept of the graphed line. Hence the term slope-intercept. So that's why it's called slope-intercept. We have our slope in the equation, and we have our y-intercept in the equation, directly in the equation. It keeps us from having to use tables. It keeps us from having to use the x and y intercepts. We have just a really easy way to graph a line if we want to. So here it is, y equals mx plus b. So that's slope-intercept form. And here's the example with numbers. Y equals negative 2x plus 3, where negative 2 would be the slope of the line, and 3 would be your y-intercept, or where it crosses the y-axis. Okay? So understanding these two numbers first and making sure that you always know that the number in front of x is your slope, the other number, or the constant, is your y-intercept. Always, no matter where they are in the equation, the number with x is the slope. Okay? So let's practice. Oh, here's our graph that they're showing you. This is the equation. Excuse me. Yeah, this is the equation. This is the graph. Notice the 3 is the y-intercept. We go to the y-axis and graph 3, and notice the slope is negative 2, or negative 2 over 1. So from 3, we go down 2 because of the negative, and we go to the right 1. And we graph another point, and there's a way to graph the line. Fairly simple. Graph the y-intercept, use the slope to graph another point. We are good to go. All right, so let's just practice identifying the slope and y-intercept first. So practicing the slope and y-intercept first, if we can get the PowerPoint to work. Okay, all right. So here's our very first equation. I've even got it highlighted for you. So the slope is the number with x, so our slope would be 3, and our y-intercept would be 4, or the constant. So even if it was written like this, our slope is still 3 because it's with the x. Our y-intercept is still 4 because it's the constant. Okay? All right, next problem. All right, 3x plus y equals 2. We don't have this one in slope-intercept form because the y is not by itself alone, as it is here. So we need to get the y by itself first. So we're going to subtract 3x from both sides, because a positive 3x and a negative 3x add to 0. That leaves us with y by itself over here. And notice the form we have this in. I'm going to go ahead and put it in mx plus b form. So I'm going to put the x term first. The negative goes first with it. And then the 2 is positive, so it's plus 2. So now we have it in slope-intercept form. So we rewrote the equation. We solved for y right up here. So my slope, oh, sorry. I should have just done that with the PowerPoint. But there's the equation. So now my slope is negative 3, because that's with the x, and my y-intercept is 2. So the first thing we need to do is always just identify the slope and the y-intercept. Then we'll learn how to graph. Okay, now graphing the equation using slope-intercept form. So we have an equation that is not written in slope-intercept form. So our first step is to rewrite it in slope-intercept form. So obviously, I subtracted, excuse me, I subtracted 2x from both sides, okay, which is how I got the negative 2x plus 3. Does everybody see? I hope you see how I got that. Okay, so now I have it in slope-intercept form. So I identify my slope. My slope is the number in front of the x, so my slope is negative 2 or negative 2 over 1. And my y-intercept is a positive 3. So this looks like the original one we graphed up above. We identified the slope and y-intercept. M is negative 2 right here, and B is 3, positive 3. Okay, so now we're going to graph it. This is the exact graph I showed you up above in your notes. So the first thing you do is you plot the point that corresponds to the y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept means where it crosses the y-axis. So if your y-intercept is positive 3, it crosses the y-axis at positive 3, or 0, 3. So you go to the y-axis and plot the point wherever your y-intercept tells you to. It might be 0, it might be positive 3, it might be negative 8. It just depends, and you'll just graph on the y-axis where your y-intercept tells you. Then you're going to use the slope to locate a second point. Since the slope is negative 2, and we talked about that, negative 2 is the same thing as negative 2 over 1, because we want our rise over run, or change in y over change in x, because that's our slope. So negative 2 is how my y changes. So I go down 2 because that's a negative 2. And then I go to the right 1 because to the right on the x-axis is positive. Okay. Now, here's another option. This is going to be a little bit different. But if I move my negative from my 2, if I move the negative down with the 1, which you can do, these are equivalent slopes. They're still negative slopes. But I'm putting my negative with my denominator instead of my numerator. I could go up 2 because of the positive 2, and then to the left 1. Sorry, I shouldn't have put a dot there. Ignore the dot. Go up 2 and to the left 1, and notice my line also intersects that point right there. Okay, here is a positive 2 and a negative 1, kind of showing the slope right there. So there's a couple of ways you can graph, as long as you know one of your numbers is negative and the other is positive, and you go the direction positive, negative, or negative, positive, because this is a positive 1. Okay? And then you draw a line through the 2 points, because that's the whole point of doing this, no pun intended there with point, is graphing the equation. And this is an easy way to graph without having to make the tables, the XY tables. Okay? All right. Now this is the last example we're going to do, is identifying parallel lines. Well, don't they all look parallel? They all look like they're parallel. These two kind of look like they might intersect later on down the page. So we're going to compare the slopes of parallel lines. So we're going to find the slope of each line. So here's my line A. To find the slope, I'm going to use my formula. The formula, I'm going to write it up here just in case you need to remember. Y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So obviously we are doing, this is my y sub 2 right here, and this is my y sub 1. So negative 1 minus 0, so that means this is my x sub 2, and this is my x sub 1. And so I have negative 1 minus 0 and negative 1 minus 2. And I find the slope, which this reduces to negative 1 over negative 3, which is the same thing as a positive 1/3. Okay? Now let's look at line B and find the slope. So let's look at this line right here. I'm going to look at these points, and we're going to do our formula. And we're going to do negative 3 minus a negative 1, and 0 minus 5. And I'm going to end up with negative 2 over negative 5, which is the same thing as positive 2 over positive 5. These two negatives cancel out and become positive. Okay? So these slopes are not the same. So let's look at the next one. Let's look at line C. So line C, because these two look like they could have been parallel possibly. So let's look at line C, and let's use our formula for slope. negative 5 minus a negative 3, and negative 2 minus 4, and I end up with negative 2 over negative 6, which reduces to a positive 1/3. So these two lines have the exact same slope, so line A and line C are parallel. Okay? We have the exact same slope, we just have different y-intercepts. They intersect the y-axis at different points. So their equations would look similar. The slope in front of the x is going to look like this. Their y-intercepts will be different. So that's how you know that lines are parallel. They will have the same exact slope. This line is not parallel to either one of these two because its slope is different. All right, you can stop the video. You can go ahead and look at the guided practice on the back. There is an example 4 on the back. Look at it if you want to. It's not a big deal. We're going to do that one in class. I would like you to try the guided practice 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the back of your notes and bring those to class for us to talk about. All right, that's it. Should be great if I could stop the video.